welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason. Here are your hosts, Richard Saunders and Stefan Sojka0.
Welcome back, Richard, back from the big Dragon Con. How is it? How are you going?
I'm doing well. You know, you'd think I'd be completely screwed up with time zones and jet lag, but
Jet lag like crazy, no?
I wasn't there long enough
to get jet lag, to feel the effects of it.
To feel the effects on coming back. I certainly felt the effects over there.
Right, okay. You came back and you're fine again.
Pretty well.
That's good. So how was it?
Amazing.
Yeah.
As you will find out, no doubt, when you come next year.
I've booked it in. I'm sick of all these big junkets and jaunts that the Zone does, and I don't tag along. It's just not right.
There we were, doing the show, everything live, which you'll hear next week, by the way.
Yeah.
Of course, next week is our 1 year anniversary of the show.
Woo-hoo. 1 year? Really? It's been a year.
It's been a year we've been cranking this out.
It feels like 5.
It does.
Only a year. Goodness
Only a year. No, that'll wait for next week. But this episode, Skeptic Zone number 48 for the 18th of September, while I was there, I had an interview with Seth Shostak.
Oh, Seth. Isn't he a SETI guy?
He is, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Is he the SETI guy?
Well, that's a good question, actually. He's one of these SETI guys.
We'll find out. That's quite a big movement, too. And I suppose we're going to find out if there's even an inkling of anything going on.
We'll find out if there's been any messages from extraterrestrials and his views on the long-term future of humans. What will we do? Will we move out into space? What are we going to do?
Will we evolve into something else? Yeah, devolve. Back to dinosaurs. We're kind of getting there. Also, another great show. This is the show just before the big anniversary, so it's a bit of a penultimate celebration today.
And a bit of a twist. Normally we'd have the think tank.
Yeah.
We still do have the think tank, but it's a New Zealand think tank.
In New Zealand?
Yeah, Kylie Sturgis, after visiting us at Dragon Con, jumped on a plane, went to Auckland, New Zealand, went to Skeptics in the pub and recorded a think tank in New Zealand.
Well, for those folks who haven't been to Auckland, I went there once, and when you talk about Skeptics in the pub, I don't know how they would have even chosen which pub to go in, because every single building in the city of Auckland is a pub.
Is it?
They're actually, it's one after the other. This entire, I went for a big walk around.
Yeah.
Every single place was a pub. There's no shops. There's no milk bars. There's no restaurants. They are all pubs. There was about 1,000 pubs in the city centre, so it would have been fun.
What a town.
It's crazy town. Oh, it's a crazy town.
Behind you, Stefan, if you reach over there, there's a new magazine.
Reaching over here now. Yep. What's this? What a spectacular cover. It's the new Skeptic magazine.
The new Skeptic magazine from Australian Skeptics. You can subscribe at www.skeptics.com.au.
This is really good.
And it's by our new editor, Tim Mendham.
Yeah.
So it's a new look magazine. There's lots of interesting articles. There's a story there about the amazing meeting.
It's chock-a-block.
Chock-a-block. There's a bit about an interview with Joe Nicol in there. There's all sorts of things.
64 pages.
Yep.
It's a bumper edition.
It's fantastic. So the new Skeptic magazine is available now. You can subscribe on the website.
This looks like it should be in a newsagent's. Is it?
It's in a few newsagents, but we're working to get it in all newsagents.
It should be in all. This is fabulous. Well done. Get the Skeptic.
Thank you, new editor Tim Mendham. Well, I can't wait to hear from Seth Shostak.
Oh, let's just get straight into the show. Let's do it. All right, Richard.
Let's go.
On with the show.
Seth Shostak is an American astronomer. He earned his physics degree from Princeton University and a PhD in astronomy from the California Institute of Technology. He is the senior astronomer at the SETI Institute in Mountain View, California, and I caught up with Seth at Dragon Con. Well, we're here at Dragon Con in 2009 in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm sitting here with Dr. Steve Roberts from the Australian Skeptics. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Richard.
And we're chatting with Seth Shostak. Hello, Seth.
Hi, Richard.
I'm very pleased that you could spare some time to speak to us today, as the vacuum man is running around and elevators going up and down, but it all adds to the...
to the ambiance, yes. It's like a good restaurant.
It's like a good restaurant. Now, you gave a very interesting talk, and I might kick off with that today, in fact, about the possible future of humanity in relation to population and space. Why is that such an interest of yours?
Well, I think it's probably an interest of everyone at some point because, you always want to know what's going to happen. I've read quite a number of books about the long-term future of the universe. In fact, I was going to write a book about the long-term future of the universe. But it's hard for people to relate to something that might happen 10 to the 100th years from now, which is a long time. Whereas if you're talking about things that might happen in 40, 50, 60 years, now that is interesting. So I think that that's what prompted my particular interest in this subject, actually.
So you hear these stories, the sun's going to go into a red giant in so many billion years. Can we start panicking now and we don't have to worry
Right, exactly. I mean, most people will say, no skin off my nose. I don't care what happens in 5 billion years. And besides, 5 billion years from now, we'll have moved somewhere else anyhow. So, and it's hard to argue with that. But if you say, look, actually, after 200,000 years of Homo sapiens, we may be running into some fundamental limits in the next generation, then that's interesting. And I don't speak here of the usual concerns, global warming and so forth. Those are all serious, but there are many people worrying about that. These are other concerns that I think are more fundamental, actually.
Right. So you're really talking about things that can conceivably affect us, possibly, or at least our children or their children.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think what happens is that you run into limits in terms of how much energy you can dump into the atmosphere. You run into limits of the kinds of metals and other resources that are necessary for a decent lifestyle. Fundamental things, not oil, you can always replace oil, but other things that, like copper, that you run out of that really make it very difficult to keep a technological society going. So these are all things that have timescales from 20 to 100 years, somewhere in there.
And you were mentioning in your talk the prospects of moving out from the planet, talking about the moon, asteroids, Mars possibly. Do you perceive that happening within a relatively short time?
Well, if you look at the current NASA budgets, one is not too optimistic about their move toward outer space. And if we wanted to colonize the moon and Mars, we could do so certainly within a generation if we wanted to try that.
You really think that would be feasible?
It's possible to do it. It's all a matter of It's all a matter of whether you really want to do it. Yeah. I mean, it isn't a technology problem. It's mostly a money problem, right? We got to the moon 40 years ago. Well, we could get back to the moon if we really want to.
I agree with you. I think we could get back there very easily. It's a money problem. But when you consider that's one thing, but to actually set up a permanent community, say on the moon. How would you even begin to tackle the problem of water, for example?
Well, water would have to be recycled. It turns out that there may be quite a bit of water actually on the moon, but it's on the South Pole, and it's ice, it's frozen. But in the shadowed regions of the South Pole of the moon, there's very good evidence that there's some water there. Quite a bit of water, actually, and you could pipe that around. You don't want to carry water from the Earth.
No.
So, how long does it take to colonize the moon in some substantial fashion? I mean, Captain Cook lands in Botany Bay in 1770 or whenever it was, and within 30 years, Australia was sort of a thriving place. I don't know that all the residents were on the up and up, but, it was they were able to survive these fatal shores, right? So if they could do that, then I do believe that we could colonize the moon or Mars. But I actually don't put a whole lot of stock in that. That's not the salvation of the planet. I think it's something we should do, and that we probably will do. But if you're really talking about how to combat the kinds of short-term problems we're going to run into, you need, I think, artificial habitats or maybe the asteroids.
That's in that slide you had with the little base sitting on an asteroid. Now, wouldn't you have all sorts of problems with the asteroid in its orbit? Could it possibly go eccentric, or they're pretty stable?
Well, their orbits are fairly stable insofar as they don't interact with anything else. Occasionally they interact with one another. Occasionally you'll get an asteroid, hit you. But that, the chances of that happening are very, very small. In the movies, whenever they go through the asteroid belt, you see this, whole hail of rocks coming your way. That's slightly exaggerated. Actually, if you were on an asteroid looking around for other asteroids, you probably wouldn't see any. And if you did, you'd need binoculars and you'd see a pinpoint of light. Really? So the chances that you're going to get hit by another asteroid are pretty small. That isn't your worst problem if you're on an asteroid. But maybe the lack of atmosphere, that might bother you more.
That might bother you more, and maybe its own rotation, possibly.
Well, the rotation might be good to give you, I don't know, change of view. It would give you that.
Well, the sun would be fairly dim from an asteroid anyway.
Well, it's true. At the asteroid belt, then since it's maybe 3 times farther away from the sun than the Earth is, and that means the intensity is down by a factor of 10, more or less. So it's 10% of the sunlight you have here on Earth. That's dimmer. You would notice that the sunlight seems weaker, but you could still grow things and so forth. I mean, it would be like a cloudy day. You could you could survive with that level of sunlight. I think that's not such a formidable problem.
Now, just getting back to this interesting point about you're on an asteroid, and you could possibly see another one going by, or you use binoculars or whatever, but we're still talking about something within the confines of the solar system, so you're getting light reflected from the sun. And I just had a thought, in the space movies you see Enterprise going through interstellar space, you see the spaceship going through interstellar space. If it wasn't lit up artificially from its own lights, would you see, or would it be so dark you couldn't see it at all?
You see spacecraft? Well, it depends on whether it had windows with lights on the inside. I mean, you might see those. I doubt that it would have navigation lights. What's the point of that?
You can see the outside of the hull, is what it means. You don't see that by stars reflecting off it.
You wouldn't see it.
Well, I mean, there's a bit of starlight. I mean, if you had really good night vision, maybe you could pick it out. But in general, no, there's not going to be a lot of lights.
You have to be there.
And you wouldn't hear it either, by the way.
You have to be where the camera is to see it.
You have to be where the camera is to see it. Now, of course, Seth, you've spent some time in Australia. Yep. Which I was delighted to hear about early on, and the Netherlands. Is this and Steve, you've certainly lived around the world, is this the fate of the astronomer, the travel?
Well, there is a lot of travel with astronomy. In the old days, that was primarily because the telescopes were never where you were living, because you don't live on top of a mountain by preference, or as a radio astronomer out in the deserts or some place which is very far from civilization as we know it. I mean, in Australia, the reason that the Parkes telescope is out in the sheep country is not because they like mutton so much as the fact that it's far away from a lot of people where you get radio interference caused by whatever machinery they have.
Yeah.
So there's that travel. But in addition, astronomy is an international endeavor. It's one of the sciences that is conducted internationally. In fact, there are very few sciences that are not. And as a consequence of that, there are always meetings, there are conventions and so forth, or just talking with your colleagues. Or maybe you have an experiment that involves people in other countries. So there is a lot of international travel.
And does that mean occasionally you are required to visit a certain area or an observatory because that's where a specialist bit of equipment is?
Yes, that is often the case. I mean, we went to Parkes, the Parkes radio telescope, for many months in 1995, because this was a very large antenna in the southern hemisphere, right? Half the sky that they can see, we can't see so well from the northern hemisphere. Right? Big advantage of having astronomy in Australia. They have access to the southern sky. And so we brought the receiving equipment we needed, and we just bolted it onto the Parkes telescope for a couple of months.
That's interesting. You've been to Parkes, Peter?
Yeah, I have, yeah. It's a fairly remote country town, but it has to be near a town. Because the people who work there have to live somewhere and buy food.
Yes, indeed.
The facilities have a school and so on. And,
yes, it's about a half-hour drive, I think.
And there's also the need for technicians to repair it and so on. So you have to have a sort of community based somewhere near a telescope.
That's right. Yes.
Some telescopes. We're talking about travel and astronomy, though. You need to travel just to go to conferences and meet other astronomers.
Yes.
Well, that would be the same in most fields of endeavour, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Even skepticism.
Yes. No, I don't think it's fundamentally any different than any other line of work, unless your line of work doesn't involve international collaboration.
Although, of course, as you were saying, going to the southern hemisphere, you get a completely different view of the
You do. The big thing you say, I have to say that it's sort of an old chestnut in astronomy, that God put all the interesting astronomy in the southern hemisphere and all the astronomers in the northern hemisphere. Now, of course, this kind of ignores the astronomers in Australia and South Africa and places like that. But it must be said there is some truth in that, because if you want to, for example, study the center of our galaxy, it's not so easily seen from the north. It only barely edges above the horizon in most parts of the United States. Whereas in Australia, you can see that all the time. It's just there. So, that's of course, a very interesting place, the center of our galaxy. So, there are just a lot of astronomical objects that you have in the southern hemisphere. The Magellanic Clouds, for example, the nearest galaxies to our own. Yes. They're in the south.
Yeah, and they're visible with the naked eye, because most Australians, I would certainly hope, are familiar with the Magellanic Clouds, and faint but visible.
Yeah, well, if Magellan could see them, then I would hope that the average resident of Penrith could see them.
Yeah, you can certainly see them from Melbourne on a clear night, from the middle of Melbourne itself.
Really?
You can see the Magellanic Clouds. They're rather faint, they're hard to make out. But if you go into the bush, they're highly prominent.
Yes.
I won't say they're sort of luminous, but you certainly spot it if it was a clear night. There's two clouds that never go away. And after about a week in Australia, you realise that those aren't clouds, they're galaxies.
A lot of people would think they're wispy clouds. Now, of course, in the Magellanic Clouds, who knows? There could be intelligent life.
It could be. I mean, there are a lot of stars in the Magellanic Clouds. They have, tens of billions of stars each. And so why not? And in fact, one of the experiments we did at the Parkes Radio Telescope, nothing that we wrote up and nothing that we actually even told many people about, it was just an experiment I did together with a fellow by the name of Ron Eakers, who is perhaps the most prominent astronomer in Australia, actually. He and I actually looked at the center of the galaxy using the Parkes Radio Telescope, hoping that we might find some very strong beacon that some enterprising civilization may have put there, knowing that everybody will be looking at the center of the galaxy. Yeah, we didn't see anything, but it was a tough observation. We only tried one night.
Of course, the segue is to talk about SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. How long have you been involved with that program?
I joined the SETI Institute, actually, in 1990, so it's been a long time. I think that's the longest job I've ever had. I was interested in SETI even before that. I was working in Europe doing radio astronomy, but I did a SETI experiment in the Netherlands together with Jill Charter, who is at the SETI Institute now and heads up our SETI programs, actually. And she came to the Netherlands there for a couple of weeks, and I said, we could do a SETI experiment. I know how to run the telescope here. And we did. We looked at, in fact, the center of the galaxy for 4 hours, which is about the best you can do on any given day in the Netherlands.
Yes. So, I mean, the statement is obvious. So far, nothing.
No, that's correct. People often ask me, well, have you found anything? And I have to turn that around. I said, do you think that we wouldn't tell you or that you wouldn't know if we had found something? I mean, I wouldn't be here. I'd be, in Stockholm collecting a prize.
You probably would. Probably would. Do you ever get the point where you're starting to get frustrated, or is it something that you realize might take a long time?
You don't get frustrated because the experiment's always changing. If you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, I think you would probably get very, very bored of that. I mean, that would become tiresome. To begin with, all the really boring stuff, the listening, as it were, that's all automated, so you don't have to do that. Mm-hmm. But the real point is that the technology changes so that the experiments every 5 years are really radically different in terms of their capability. Yeah. But beyond that, you also have learned more, right? Within the next 3 years, the NASA's Kepler mission is going to tell us what fraction of stars have Earth-like planets. Well, when we know that number, that's going to help in the search, because it may turn out that a certain kind of star system preferentially has cousins of the Earth orbiting it. If we know that, then we can target those stars. So the field is always changing, both because of this new knowledge and because the technology gets faster all the time.
Does that mean one of the variables in the Drake equation is going to be filled in?
Yes, one is. And that is, what fraction of planets are Earth-like planets. Yeah. Or it's actually nbsp is the factor, and that's, how many planets in a planetary system are Earth-like, and we don't know what that is on average.
Yeah. I remember, as I'm sure most of my listeners will remember, a time where we didn't know or identify or know where any extrasolar planets were. And now I don't even know what the number is.
Yeah, I don't either, but it's in excess of 350. But really that number, while impressive, is not so interesting. What's interesting is to know what fraction of stars have planets, right? Because you can keep adding planets and adding planets and adding planets. But what you really want to know is, look, are planets rare, planets like the Earth? Are they rare or are they commonplace? And that we don't know. Despite having found 350 planets, none of them is really a cousin of the Earth. And the question is that because they're not there or because simply our instruments are not yet capable of finding them? And that's what's going to change, thanks to Kepler, as I say, in the next 1,000 days, 3 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Of course, the information that we're receiving now, the new knowledge, things that completely floored me, and I'm sure many other people, the knowledge that there are giant gas planets orbiting their stars at extremely close range.
Yeah, that was the first planet around an ordinary star that was discovered in 1995 by the two Swiss astronomers. 51 Pegasi is the name of the star. Orbits that star in 4.5 days. Well, there are no planets in our solar system that orbit in 4.5 days. Mercury takes 88, and that's the fastest. So nobody was expecting to find a planet that orbit that quickly. And not only that, it's a very large planet. Nobody expects to find very large planets close in. Because on the basis of what we know about how planets are formed, we expect that they will be formed far out in the solar systems of their birth. So how did that planet get to where it is? And immediately the theoreticians began to rip out their pads and papers and their pads and pencils and try and figure this out. And their best guess is that these planets migrate inward. In other words, they're born in the boondocks and they move to the big city. They slowly spiral in.
presumably they reach a point where they're in equilibrium, or they could continually spiral into their sun?
Well, it depends. Some of them might indeed spiral all the way into the sun. Of course, you don't see those guys because they're long gone. But some of them will be able to get into an orbit where they just sort of distort the star that they're orbiting, because they're very close after all. They distort the gas of the star, the outer regions of that star, in just such a way that it pulls them along and keeps them from spiraling in. So it turns out that there may be some stable situation there where they're orbiting very, very close without going all the way in.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So that's a completely unexpected sort of thing. A dozen years ago, nobody would have considered this an interesting question to ask. Yeah. Could this be possible?
Well, there must be amazing variation in solar systems, ranging from gas giants near the middle, near the sun, all the way out to Pluto-like planets in the extremes.
We don't know what average solar systems look like yet. Yeah. And obviously we assumed on the basis of the one example we had, namely our own solar system, that everybody else's solar system would be sort of like ours, little rocky planets on the inside, big gas giants on the outside. And that's just sort of assuming that, as I did when I was a kid, that everybody's mom had a mom who could, or everybody's mom cooked the way my mom did. Yes. I just assumed that. Then I grew up and I found that wasn't true, to my disappointment, I have to say. So we assume that other solar systems are like our own, and we don't know that that's true, or whether it's not true. I mean, we just don't know. But the Kepler mission will help us answer that question, actually. And again, the time scale to answer it is not decades or centuries. This is something we're going to learn very quickly.
That's extraordinary.
The formation of solar systems has been modelled, and you can make the modelling at random and see what planets arise and do millions of experiments in a computer. And they come out all shapes and sizes, so there can be big planets close in or planets further out or whatever. But the conditions for life on Earth are fairly restricted. I mean, it's said that Venus is too hot and Mars is too cold, so that...
the Goldilocks zone, don't they call it?
Yeah, you can only really get a sort of life in one particular zone. So the number of stars orbiting the planet is only one of many factors in the equation. You need to know how far out they are and how hot it is or how cold, and is the planet friendly to life and so on. Does it have oceans, or if it's a gas giant, could there be beings swimming in the liquefied gas and so on? So you sure have to bring your figures down a bit to allow for the possibility of planets not being quite in the right place to support life.
Well, that's correct. When I say an Earth-like planet, of course, what Kepler is, in fact, nominally looking for, that means a planet that's not only the same size as Earth, but that's located at the right distance from its star to be, as you say, Richard, in the Goldilocks zone, where it's not too hot, not too cold, and you're going to have liquid water and maybe, something cooking up down there.
Yes. Kind of a bizarre question. There's a lot of woo-woo stuff about UFOs and extraterrestrials and so on, believed by some parts of society. There's a subculture of all this, and the public is aware of it. It's in the movies and so on. I was wondering if public interest in that actually damages your cause, actually affects getting funding for SETI.
Well, I don't think so. Maybe I'm being naive, but I don't honestly think so. I get a lot of correspondence about UFOs, and people call up frequently, and they also send me lots of email asking questions about UFOs, or simply to tell me what they've seen or to send me photos and so forth. I don't believe that these people are thinking, I'm definitely not going to give these guys money because, they don't think that we're being visited, and I do. I just don't see that as an issue. There is some tension between the UFO community and the SETI community for reasons that are not entirely clear to me. I mean, after all, in some sense, we're both looking for extraterrestrial intelligence. But
they've already found it.
Well, you see, there is that difference. They claim they've succeeded, and we don't make that claim yet. But there is some sort of emotional tension there. But I don't know that it hurts. I honestly don't. A third of the American population, and for that matter, a third of the population of Australia, thinks that we're being visited. So it's not a fringe belief. It's mainstream belief.
Well, Steve Roberts, thanks for joining us up here today in the very interesting middle of the Hilton Hotel here in Atlanta, with elevators going up and down.
Rather bizarre environment, actually.
It's uplifting. And, of course, Seth Shostak, thank you so much for giving us your time today for the Skeptics.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
This is Desiree Schell, host of Skeptically Speaking. Check out our website at skepticallyspeaking.com and listen to us live on CJSR 88.5 FM in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I now return you to the Skeptic Zone.
British illusionist and mentalist Derren Brown recently wowed the world by seeming to predict the winning Lotto numbers. This caused a great deal of media commentary, and I was asked to give my thoughts on Sydney Radio 2UE with my good friend Glenn Wheeler.
Last week on the program, Enda Brady, who gives us the UK report later on in the show, told us about a British illusionist, Derren Brown, who left viewers in Britain scratching their heads after he appeared to have correctly predicted the 6 winning numbers in the UK's televised lottery draw. Now, it was quite an amazing story. After leaving viewers in suspense as to how he actually did it, he finally revealed all overnight in a ratings bonanza, apparently, which drew in more than 4.5 million people, called How to Win the Lottery. Well, of course you'd be watching, naturally enough, because everyone wanted to find out how to win the lottery. So here we've got this bloke, and he is an illusionist, Derren Brown, who, well, to all intents and purposes, correctly predicted the 6 winning numbers in a UK lottery draw. He stated, now this is Derren Brown, he stated that the correct numbers were chosen by a combination of, quote, deep maths and averaging out the subconscious predictions of 24 people, a method inspired by an old country fair trick. Now, this was his interpretation of it. All sounds rather fabulous, doesn't it? He claimed that the trick tells how a crowd of people at a country fair accurately estimated the weight of an ox when their guesses were all averaged out. Yeah, okay. But, of course, needless to say, many people aren't buying the explanation. Mathematicians have dismissed his explanation as absolute, complete and utter rubbish, absolute, complete and utter nonsense. So I thought that I'd go to the bloke that I always turn to in situations like this, who always has an answer for all of this. And, well, he's a bit of a sceptic at heart because he is the Vice President of the Australian Skeptics Association. Richard Saunders, good evening.
Hey, Glenn, good evening.
Hi, mate. This would be right up your alley. You'd love this one.
I loved it. I thought it was fantastically good fun. And the way that the media and the television stations were reporting, something in Britain, even here in Australia, really knocked my socks off. So full marks to Derren Brown for pulling off what he wanted to do, which was to get attention and have an amusing and entertaining spot on the TV.
And look, I watched it tonight on, I think it was on Today Tonight. They showed part of his How to Win the Lottery show, which drew an audience of 4.5 million people, which in itself is outstanding. But of course, that just proves one thing: we all want to win the lottery.
Yes.
But in the little bit of a snippet that they showed, he appeared to me to actually almost be taking the piss out of himself. I mean, he almost owned up to the fact that this is an illusion.
Well, you've said it when you were introducing the segment and the story. That's what he is. He's an illusionist. When he pulls off the amazing, the impossible, the astonishing, people all automatically forget for some reason that it's an illusion, a trick, a con. Well, a con is a bit too heavy. When David Copperfield or another great magician saws the lady in half or flies across the stage, we all know it's a very, very, very clever trick. So when Derren Brown does something where he appears to manipulate people's minds or behaviors or actions or predicts the winning lotto numbers, please be entertained by it. Have your socks knocked off, but it's a trick.
Yeah, don't get too carried away.
Don't get too carried away.
Because, you guys and girls at the Australian Skeptics, you love all of this sort of stuff, and particularly you love the people who do take themselves seriously and who purport to be able to do all these wondrous things which have absolutely no scientific basis whatsoever.
Well, it comes back to the fact that magic, or the profession of conjuring, as it's really known, is a very ancient and noble and respected and decent art form. The idea is to fool you, to trick you, and ultimately to give you a great night's entertainment and leave you wandering away scratching your head. But they don't ever say, by the way, I really am making the woman fly, or I really am defying the laws of physics by sawing this woman in half. They say, I'm here to astonish you and amaze you, and I hope we all equally have a great time. What we find is very sad is some people who have learned very interesting and skillful magic tricks will then go and say, by the way, I really am doing this. This isn't a trick. I'm doing this by some strange magical powers which science hasn't caught up with. And the magicians and the skeptics say, oh, come on, why are you spoiling it for everybody else? This is a noble art. You shouldn't be doing this with it.
And yet there would be plenty of people who would have watched that who, I assume, would go away thinking it really happened.
Well, that's all very well. That's fine. Maybe that's part of the fun and the magic of it. If they get back to the basics, and again, it's all in what he is. He is an illusionist. It's an illusion. I guess you can't convince some people because a good illusion that looks real. That's the hallmark of a good magic trick. You have to. It almost sucks you in. And there's a part of your brain that always has to remember, oh, it's a trick, it's a trick. They've worked for years to make it look like it's really happened.
How would he have done this?
I've watched it a couple of times, actually, and I've studied it very carefully. I don't know the exact mechanism that he employed, and I don't know if I want to, even if I did, I mean, I must say, well, would it be right if I blabbed a trick, for the world to know? I think it's got something to do with probably ultimately camera trickery in the end. But is that the important thing? As long as people were entertained and as long as they don't take it too seriously, I think that's more important.
I think you're right. So in other words, when his final program on the topic of how to bring down a casino goes to air, we shouldn't worry too much about watching that so we can go and close down Star City.
Yeah, I don't think so. And if he really could predict the winning Lotto numbers, that would be the end of Lotto. In this country and all countries, it would just cease.
Oh, it's a spooky old world out there, Richard, isn't it?
It's good, but it's good fun, Glenn.
Good on you, mate. We'll talk again some more.
I hope so.
Thanks, mate.
Bye now.
Richard Saunders there from the Australian Skeptics, going where no man has gone before. Well, that's not true. Actually, Richard and his crew are just fabulous at being able to look at some of these things and very simply just sort of break it all down so that it's not quite as mystical and amazing as it may first seem. How could somebody actually just pick the winning Lotto numbers like that? It's not that simple, surely.
AstronomyCast takes a facts-based journey through the cosmos as it offers listeners weekly discussions on astronomical topics ranging from planets to cosmology. Hosted by Fraser Cain of Universe Today and myself, Dr. Pamela Gay of Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, this show brings the questions of an avid astronomy lover directly to an astronomer. Together, Fraser and I explore what is known and being discovered about the universe around us. Join us each week as we take a facts-based journey through the cosmos at astronomycast.com.
Join us now for Drinking Skeptically in the Think Tank.
I'm Kylie Sturgis, and on the 10th of September, on the way back from DragonCon, I was honoured to be invited to speak at the very first Skeptics in the Pub in Auckland, New Zealand. Out of the 50 or so who attended, a group helped out with an impromptu think tank in the courtyard of the Horse and Trap, a lovely pub in the suburb of Mount Eden. The very first Skeptics in the Pub in Auckland. Say hello, Auckland.
Hello, Auckland.
So how many people did we end up getting, do you think?
Over 40.
Over 40 people. And you are?
I'm Mike Kilpatrick.
You're Mike Kilpatrick. Oh, I can hear something coming past.
So few pubs in New Zealand, we had to meet in the train station.
Of all the pubs we had to go to the one with the train station.
And then Skeptic Zone's got the bus announcements. We've got actual trains coming by.
Well done, Auckland. Another thing that Auckland has managed to get going is a couple of ideas.
People tend to agree on the pub, which is a good thing, because that's part of the point of being here. Once-a-month meetings. But I think one of the good things is a positive message. Skepticism needs to be positive. Education is more effective than criticism. Although I do like criticising myself. So no Maori culture bashing, please. There are other issues to focus on. And the idea of having speakers, having a talk every time, maybe 20 minutes to half an hour, then a discussion to invite plenty of speakers along. I think that's about it. Once a month, pub is good, yes.
And so, pub is good. What sort of big issues that have led these people here? And I've got about, 2, 4, 6, 8, about maybe nearly 15 of us. what led you to come here? Because I think there's something that needs to be heard. Anyone want to volunteer? One of the things it said was no Maori culture bashing. That intrigues me.
I think one of the main reasons a lot of people came here is because of the recent court case where Janet Moses, a young Maori lady, was killed by a group of people who honestly believed they were performing an exorcism.
Oh my
God. She basically drowned in her own living room because they were pouring water down her mouth and into her eyeballs, and she died.
Oh,
and they got 300 hours community service as a penalty, so no jail time. They're not allowed out of their houses between 6 at night and 9 in the morning. That's their punishment for killing this young lady. And they're basically let off because they honestly believed that they were doing the right thing, which is removing a ghost from this lady.
What about some of the things that you feel like you could have a control over, things that you can have a say over? What are some of the big things that you think, if I just had a few more people or a few more voices or maybe a couple of tactics, I could do something about X? What is X?
One of the things I was thinking about just the other day was there's a display stand in the mall for a chiropractic company that's in the area. I grabbed a couple of their flyers and I've actually scanned them, and I was going to look for an expert opinion to see if there's something actionable that they've said on their flyers and on their materials, whether that's something that we can send to some sort of whoever's in charge of advertising, I guess, to say, look, they're saying this and here's what the actual facts are. And that's something that's just come up because of course, Simon Singh and the BCA and what have you up there. So, yeah, that's something that I'm trying to do, is I keep an eye out for things that I can grab their material and say, here, this is wrong. Someone should know about it and complain about it to someone.
And so what we have here is some concerns which seem to be universal. You're hearing about other countries, other authors. You mentioned Simon Singh standing up and saying, no, this isn't on. Yeah.
It goes unchallenged in New Zealand. I don't think there is in New Zealand skeptics groups, but I see very little of it in the media when there's pseudoscience and when there's things that are pseudoscientific. There is no pushback. Part of my desire to get people here was to try and find out if there was enough people in Auckland who were actually willing to do something about it, willing to get off their bum and actually come to a meeting to start with, but actually to start that pushback, to say it's not okay for John Edwards to come and rip people off to the tune of whatever it is, $100.
And he's touring at the moment, isn't he?
He's come to New Zealand, and he's not the only psychic in New Zealand. We have a TV show called Sensing Murder.
Oh, yes. Whenever we get mail from New Zealand, it's about sensing murder. I can see people nodding.
It won a Qantas Media Award a couple of years back for best programme. And
you're kidding.
No, it won an award. And that's the kind of thing that really gets me. And there was no letter in the newspaper that says we find this abhorrent because they're just ripping people off. There was nothing like that. And that's what kind of disappointed me, and part of the reason why I hope that there'll be enough people in Auckland to get something together.
Actually, I don't think there's big issues. Well, there are, but let's just gently nibble away at all the crap that you see on the TV.
Skeptics in Auckland, we nibble crap. Is that going to be?
We nibble crap. We nibble away at crap. I think it's the best. Just write to newspapers, phone the stupid bloody talkback shows and say, well, that was a pile, wasn't it? Just say, where do you come up with this nonsense? Prove to me that this works. Like the Ben Goldacre he's got his T-shirts, and it says, I think you'll find it's a bit more complicated than that. Yeah. Because everybody wants 10-second answers to questions that have taken millennia to try and solve. It's the classic 30-second news bite.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't exist.
Yeah. What other things make you... Oh, here we go.
Well, I didn't actually intend to contribute, but two of the things have already sort of been my personal bugbears, and one of them was the Makatu case, but probably for the opposite reason to the one suggested, because somebody blogged about that on the website and actually bought the actual sentencing decision and gave it to that person, because I think if you have a view, you need to be informed about the facts, and the reason people aren't informed is because of media, and that's one of my big bugbears, because I think they bear a lot of the blame in terms of what everybody said. I guess, substantively, oh God, I sound like a lawyer now, in terms of substantively and procedurally, because firstly they report crap, inaccurate stuff most of the time, but also they are the means by which most of everybody else's rubbish is sort of spread throughout the community, and they don't challenge ever, well, almost never. You hardly ever see great journalism in New Zealand that really challenges bad beliefs and dodgy ideas, and that's my personal on a daily basis, I think.
Right? There was a story about how Antarctica is melting or something like that, and they were driving down big drills to get ancient water. And what did they show you on your TV? A bloody polar bear falling off an ice floe. What idiots write this rubbish? You know, they have no cognitive processes whatsoever.
So one goal could be said is to get in touch with journalists, get in touch with the media, have a voice there, be a representative, be a contact point for them. The Auckland Skeptics could be one, perhaps. Do you think?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm putting myself in a dodgy position. I am a journalist. I'm trained as a journalist.
Oh, that's it. He has to leave now.
The one thing about journalism is it's ingrained that journalism needs balance, and that's fine where there's two equally dissenting sides to the story.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, science doesn't work like that. But because balance is ingrained and people expect balance in their news stories, it means that for every scientific piece that's written, there has to be the bullshit response at the end, which is someone who says that actually it's not true and that, you know, you don't have to spend thousands on pharmaceuticals because the plant in your garden is going to cure your cancer. And unfortunately, that's just the way journalism is. The good thing, of course, is that blogs aren't constrained by those journalistic standards. Good blogs will have rights of reply, will correct errors, and will make sure that people can understand when errors have been made and are visible. But they can focus in on what the actual story is and point to the real facts, point to the papers, and that's something that journalists in newspapers, and traditionally newspapers and even online, aren't able to do, and that's a big problem.
I know that Channel 7 and Yahoo have recently contacted the Australian Skeptics and allowed them space for an official blog on their site. So possibly even getting in touch with groups and saying we could contribute writers in this regard to your site to add to the balanced perspective on occasion. That's another avenue to look into.
I suspect that they may actually want contributions from people as well.
Yeah.
And they may just not know who to ask. I know that Vicky Hyde does get into the newspaper from time to time. Some people ring her when they need a skeptic.
Yeah.
But maybe if we make it known that there are people available who want to talk, who have some knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's many different qualifications here, aren't there? I've met lawyers, I've met scientists, journalists. We've even got a cartoonist, people who are artists, students, student teachers. Does that surprise you in any way, the fact that people come from so many different backgrounds and disciplines? People are shaking their heads no.
I don't think it should surprise you any more than it would surprise you that people that believe in strange things come from all areas and all walks of life, and even highly intelligent people.
Oh,
just a note of disappointment here. When the poor polar bear, did anybody go, "Oh, you unfeeling bastards"?
So highly intelligent but slightly sociopathic. No. But no, I would say, in fact, you're very caring because you're making the effort here to do something for the community by being skeptics. I mean, that's one of the overall messages here. We're caring about not only the health and welfare and consumer rights of these people, but many of you are also touching upon, well, there's cultural aspects to consider in New Zealand. This is Auckland, after all. How does that impact upon being a skeptic? People are nodding, shaking. Yeah. Oh.
Hi, I'm John. The thing that I see about Auckland is that in New Zealand in general is we're a small, diverse country where people have had to get along because we're all come from diverse backgrounds. So there's a culture of not getting at one another, and that there's a culture of not knocking. If you are seen to be knocking something, you are a bad person. Skeptics get up and say that sensing murder is bad and everyone else is enjoying the entertainment. They say, get lost, you knocker. So there's this culture there, and that's a problem that I see there. And I'm interested in finding ways around that. as well as that.
Well, I was saying something, he was saying something, but anyway, the only observation that I was going to make is you were talking about cultural diversity, and I'm just looking around this table and around the room. Is there anybody in this pub who is not European?
Yes, I was just thinking that myself as I looked around and said, hello? We have women here.
There were a few girls here because I thought there'd be all science geek boys and I might be the only one. So I'm relieved there are a few.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly happy to represent the Australians by being a female. Yeah, but
Use their culture as an excuse for bleeding, I think.
How do you think you might be able to tap into other people's backgrounds and perhaps make them see that this is something that isn't just, as you said, white geeky boy? Let's all be fans of Ben Goldacre and say Steve Novella's a hottie, that sort of thing. Oh, come on, you knew that you were thinking Steve Novella's a hottie. That's why you were coming along. Yeah.
I think the answer to that is unshackling yourself from your background.
So I guess there's a challenge there in terms of...
Other people to change is that the cultural thing is quite strong in this country, and that's a hard thing to break because it's family, it's whānau, it's all that stuff as well.
Maybe one solution could be touching base with people who are into consumer rights organisations, people with human rights organisations.
It's good that this meeting has happened because we're just starting to meet people who are, like-minded individuals. We just need to get a wider diversity of people along, not just middle-aged males.
Does anyone have any comments to make about the atheist-skeptic link?
An interesting thing.
An interesting thing. Why?
Well, I definitely see the link between scepticism and atheism because, well, from my perspective anyway, religion is something that's very easy to be sceptical of. And I see a very strong link between not believing in, say, alternative medicine and not believing in God because they're both things that have very little or no evidence for them. I know that there are there are a reasonable number of religious people who would also say that they're skeptics and who would not believe in a lot of things. But on the other hand, I also think, well, you don't believe in all these other things, but you believe in this guy 2,000 years ago that was nailed to a tree, and that means all your sins are forgiven.
That might be, in fact, a really good topic for a debate or a discussion for us skeptics in the pub one night.
It's one of those things, it's a danger because there is no pigeonhole. You can't pigeonhole a skeptic. You can't say everyone here believes this and doesn't believe in that, because everyone has their own opinions and that's been formed through their entire lives. And so although I'm an atheist, I deliberately kind of kept away from atheism. When it comes to fighting pseudoscientists, I believe you find the bedfellows that you can to fight those kind of things. And there may well be thousands of Christians out there who find the idea of psychics completely abhorrent and against their principles, and we shouldn't discount those people simply because we happen to disagree with them about organised religion. And it's one of those difficult things that we're going to have to deal with and we may have to debate, but we can't afford, if we're going to use scepticism and the skeptics in the pub in Auckland positively, we can't afford to alienate whole groups of people just because they don't have one specific belief that we may disagree with.
Yeah, I'm kind of along the same lines as Mike on that. But getting back to the previous thing about how we actually work on skepticism, I think we have to start working more on sounds bad, working more on children, but educating children. So I've got 3 kids myself, and I know that school holidays are coming up. A lot of the school holiday programs are run through churches. Or church groups, Salvation Army, the local Baptist group, all that kind of stuff. And there are very few, although there are some secular groups, there are no true critical thinking school camps or school programs or anything like that goes around for kids. And even in schools, there are actual evangelists and preachers that come into schools, and you can give permission for your child to go and listen to them. And yet I don't think there are any evangelical skeptics or that go into schools to promote critical thinking with children. And children are sponges. They will believe anything you tell them.
At the most recent Dragon Con, we had an amazing number of parents and teachers and presenting parents. Hopefully some of the audio will come up on several of the podcasts. And I know that people are just astounded at how much support there was for the idea of a critical thinking show. You might know that Richard Saunders and Dr. Rachel Dunlop do the Mystery Investigators, which is a children's show, and they presented at Dragon Con this year. And we had mostly parents in the audience, a couple of kids who just went nutso and ran around with dowsing rods for the demonstrations. But it was quite a lot of parents saying, this is really clever, I could do this. Or people who didn't have kids but were interested in maybe the performance or presentation side and saying, I could probably do something similar. So maybe getting in touch with science communication bodies, presenting groups at museums and so forth and seeing if you could take part. I believe the Victorian Skeptics do something similar like that. They have a stall during Science Week. Do you have Science Week here in New Zealand? Some people are shrugging, some people are nodding. Looking into that might be useful. People are sort of shrinking into themselves. Oh God, please don't make me dress up as a science clown and juggle for the entertainment of kids. I can't handle that. Anyone else have any good ideas or things that they would like to do? I think one of the overwhelming things is have fun, network.
I think that as skeptics, we need to become, I guess, polite educators, especially in New Zealand, as you said earlier, when you come up against other people, they don't like being rubbed the wrong way. We're a culture of just getting along with everyone. And I think what we need to do is really sort of take advice from other guys that have looked at, how to approach people, how to, I guess, calm down for a start, stop rolling your eyes, and actually listen to the other people and then be able to walk them through their own illogical state. Excellent. Really, and then sort of try and 180 them round to. And with kids of my own, I know that they look to us to show them what to do and where to go. And if they're looking at, I guess, the wrong blackboard, they're going to learn the wrong stuff. It's being able to show them something that is believable, something that they can turn around and they know is going to still be standing there, and really sort of give them a good base so that they can continue on with.
It's such an opportunity because the internet has made everything so much more accessible. No longer, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, you were a skeptic, and you struggled to find anyone else to converse with. I've on Twitter, I'm in contact with Kylie. I'm with Dr. Ricci. I've had I had an email from James Randi. It was just awesome to open up my inbox and find an email from James Randi. These people aren't untouchable. There are people out there who are willing to help all over the world, and it would be remiss not to use those kind of resources. And I think we've got a real opportunity to be positive. I think that's the key thing, is to be positive, not to be negative about skepticism, but to be positive and take that message out to as many people as we can, without getting into the old habit of being seen as naysayers and being negative.
You got an email from James Randi?
Yes, he did. He got an email out of James Randi.
I think that's a good point that you touched on, and one that I find irritating too, is this idea that there's such negativity associated with it. If you're trying to be rational and reasonable, it's like you're cold and unfeeling, and you're not really compassionate, and you don't really understand how I feel, and there's that real negativity. Whereas I'm normally trying to say, well, actually, it's because I really care deeply about this poor child not dying because they have cancer when there's perfectly good medical treatment available to them. That's why, all these people in jail who shouldn't be. That's why I get so, I guess I'm passionate about it. It's not a negative thing, that it's actually because you care that's why you are a skeptic.
You mentioned the internet as a powerful force for getting people together. Where can people go to find out more about the Auckland Skeptics?
Okay, I started Christchurch Skeptics in the Pub about 3 or 4 months ago, and we've got it down to the point now where we have fortnightly meetings alternating Monday and Tuesday, because some people can't make it on Monday, some people can't make it on Tuesday. We also have monthly video evenings, but they tend to be a more atheist-themed thing, but I'm fine with that. I've also started this one, and Mike has been put in charge of this one because, well, I don't live here.
Yeah.
And we've also started the Wellington Skeptics in the Pub meetup, and hopefully the first meeting of that will be on the opening night of the New Zealand Skeptics Conference 2009 in Wellington.
Brilliant. So you have the New Zealand Skeptics Conference coming up soon?
We do,
yep.
At the end of the month.
And I hope that some people here will not find it too difficult to make the jump across the ocean in order to see some of the Australian conferences that are coming too. Have people got plans for those? Yeah, one hand? People are waving hands, people are nodding. We'll see how it goes. And certainly I hope that some of the members from those conferences will be able to head towards New Zealand, because you are a country with an identity that deserves just as much respect as Australia, and just as much as the US.
Possibly a little bit more so.
Good. So all hail to Auckland Skeptics, and thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being part of the first think tank in Auckland. Thank you. The official meetup.com site for the Auckland Skeptics can be found on auckland.skepticsinthepub.net.nz. Skeptics in New Zealand should also be checking out skepticsinthepub.net.nz.
There's a new podcast called The Geologic Podcast, a balanced, calm, rational look at the world and all of the people in it.
Motherfucker! 4 notes away!
Alright, here's the deal. There's this guy, his name is George Hrubb, and he's got this geologic podcast. Believe me, the last thing you want to do is listen to this garbage. I mean, look at the kind of things he does. He's got this one bit, it's called Religious Moron of the Week.
Religious Moron of the Week.
Then he does this stupid bit where his grandmother talks about entertainment news.
It must be time for Grandma's entertainment report.
Plus, this George character's got some strange fascination with animals where he talks about them in a thing called Interesting Fauna.
Interesting fauna.
I mean, it's all just so stupid. The last thing you want to do is go to www.geologicpodcast.com and listen to this garbage. Believe me, your time will be better spent making yourself a sandwich or something.
www.geologicpodcast.com.
So New Zealand's a bit of a party town, eh, Stefan?
New Zealand is a big party town. I honestly could not believe how many pubs there were in that place. I don't know whether I have a suspicion, because it was after hours, that all the shops they sort of all their shop fronts actually revolve around. And all the sort of bars and bottle shops and stuff sort of replaced them. I couldn't believe it.
Well, those New Zealand skeptics certainly sound like they're having a good time. New Zealand skeptics in the pub, and you heard the details there on Kylie's think tank, how to get involved. New Zealand people, get involved.
I think they need it over there. There's a few crazies, a few wackos.
Oh, there?
Oh, yeah. They need a little bit of level-headedness over there.
In New Zealand?
Yeah.
I think I better go and suss it out
I think you
myself.
should, Rich. I think you need to go there as an ambassador.
I do.
And sort it out.
Yeah, I don't do enough travel.
No, you don't do enough travel. I don't do enough. Let me go.
All right, you go.
Okay, I'll go. So what's going to happen next week?
Next week is our special 1-year anniversary episode of the Skeptic Zone with the live Skeptic Zone from DragonCon.
Wow.
No, next year, man. Next year.
I've got to be there.
You will.
It's terrible. But yeah, well,
let's start a movement. Get Stefan out of the country, or get Stefan to DragonCon.
To DragonCon. Actually, I've got a plan to get there.
Yeah.
I've actually created my own new age product, which I'm going to be offering for sale soon. And with the funds, the funds from the product, I'm going to use to go to DragonCon.
We'll hear about that soon.
The big announcements coming up shortly.
Excellent. All right, Steph.
In the next couple of weeks.
Excellent.
Maybe even at the birthday show. See you next week, Richard.
Bye, Steph.
All right.
You've been listening to The Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.
The Skeptic Zone.